This anime season is looking pretty interesting to say the least. But instead of doing what you should watch 2018 list, I want to do something different. How to start off your anime fall 2018 by taking a look at 3 quick anime. Goblin Slayer, which has a lot of talk to say the least. Like, a lot of talk. Jesus, that's a lot of talk. What the fuck is that shit? JoJo's Part 5, and Uichi no Maid ga Uzasugiru. Neo, how do you pronounce this shit? Uzamaid, which is an anime I haven't heard of until recently. I am watching other anime, but I'm going to be limiting it to these 3. So, let's get started.
Milady, do you know where I can slay some goblins?
Better. Why don't you take a pause on slaying goblins and come here and slay my pussy?
Pussy? Is that some kind of goblin?
The reaction of Goblin Slayer on Twitter is interesting to say the least. And the easiest way to put it is, they are all wrong. I can never agree with not having something in fiction on the basis that it is morally wrong. Geoff saying this is worse than rape hentai, which it isn't. I can name a lot far worse than this. Goblin Slayer is pretty mild in comparison. People thinking this is fascist, and some even saying the goblins represent Jews. I mean, if you think they represent Jews, I wonder what that says about you. Then we have these guys who are saying the rape scenes are bad because it's sexualized, and then makes a whole list of sexy pictures from the rape scene to prove their point. Even though I have huge disagreements with it, but I'm not going to show that on YouTube, and the manga is actually far worse. It is clearly shown as a bad thing, and actually has all of them brutally killed for it. As for Chibi... No! Goblin Slayer, in my opinion, is very hard to concretely say if it was good or bad first episode. If it is for comedic purposes, then this show is absolutely funny with its dark humor. Pretty ironic that a team of skilled rookies, as much of a contradiction as that sounds, who had dreams and aspirations of becoming the best and graduated from some talented places, was beaten by some of the lowest creatures, to the point that they classed them as small children in both physical strength and intelligence. So you can watch as their dreams get crushed, along with her bones, while their allies are killed, and they couldn't heal the wounds because they couldn't buy potions, and their healer was a first-time healer, while underestimating their opponents. In a twisted way, this could be seen as comedic, with Curb Your Enthusiasm constantly playing at every corner. You get the point. As a comedy, it is hilarious. But if we're being serious, then I got some problems. So hear me out. The goblins are as dumb as children and weak as them too, yet smart enough to plan out a way to beat the rookies. But then they start going full retard.
Never go full retard.
They beat the brawler and immediately start to rape her. Hello? The other girl is getting away?
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
You would think they would have at least a few to go after her instantly rather than wait a bit. Or have the goblins drag her away deeper into the cave, and then rape her. If you think about it, why would they rape her right there, and then walk a little distance to go where they live, and start raping her again?
It just raises too many questions.
This would make more sense if they were far away from the cave. But all this tells me is the audience needs to see them do it the moment they break her bones. I'm not opposed to them showing it. In fact, I think they should have shown it. But it should have been after they dragged her away. And all you hear is her screaming and crying, with it getting louder and louder as the Goblin Slayer gets closer. Thus, ultimately, once they get there, it will be showing a battered, broken human full of cum while being raped. There is also the part where they shoot the healer in the arm and just push her off to try to rape the girl who's almost dead. What? I would have thought they would have tried to deal with the one who could move first rather than the one who couldn't. They gave up on her and went to the healer only because she wets herself and that turns them on.
Swiggity Swooty, I'm coming for that booty.
They are dumb like children, but smart enough to lay traps and beat rookie adventurers, with having enough knowledge to make poison, which, by the way, there was no poison on the first weapon, but that could just be animation error, so it can be forgiven a bit. All this just points to them having inconsistent amount of knowledge and primal instinct. So what am I saying? They didn't rapa them correctly. Alright, everybody back in the cave. I don't care if you had a traumatic scene.
Now do it again and do it right.
I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it correctly, and in a way to make sense.
That's right!
If the healer was just a little less of a good person, she would have abandoned the caster and ran away and escaped. By the way, don't the casters feel a little useless in this show? The mage is limited to 2 spells, and the healer is limited to 3 spells. I mean, sure, Megumin from Konosuba is limited to 1 spell, and 2 if she gets help from Aqua and Kazuma. But at least her 1 spell is strong enough to wipe out everything and everyone. Speaking of which, I think this cave is Darkness's dream place.
Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time.
The group's teamwork is pretty bad, but we don't know if they've known each other for a long time, or if they just met recently, so it isn't a flaw to have terrible teamwork. They were all focused fighting by themselves, rather than actually doing teamwork, which made them lose in the end.
Not a great plan.
As far as Goblin Slayer goes, he doesn't have much of a personality. I don't know if he's going to be an emotionless hero type, or if he's going to be Doom Guy badass. But one thing that kept bothering me is the inconsistent switch from CG to not CG. I was getting CG whiplash. Now, I normally hate CG, but even some of the best CG still looks unappealing to me. The only time I've actually liked CG is usually when it's so bad it's good, like in Overlord.
I have several questions.
Although I gotta say for some scenes it looks okay, but I think that's more despite the CG rather than because the CG. As a Gorefest, it was pretty good. I like how they went full Star Wars Episode 3 on the younglings, just so that they won't grow up hating humans and causing more trouble. The fights in Goblin Slayer wasn't bad, although just going around one-shotting everything is a bit anticlimactic, which includes the big guy. But I suppose he's supposed to be the best of the best, so we'll just have to see what lies in store for us later. It's time to address Pedantic's video. I'm not freaking out that the goblins have no real death beyond they're bad because they raped, pillaged, and kidnapped, because they are fodder. And they were always meant to be fodder instead of some final villain. That is how you live, considering the only way they can reproduce is with human females. We don't need an in-depth backstory for fodder. And to say this show is just like SAO because of one aspect, and you are a hypocrite for liking this show but hating SAO, is the most surface level shit I've ever heard in a long time.
You have taken a complicated question, and you have trivialized it with your answer and lack of experience.
When Sword Art Online did it, it was a guy who was relatively normal and kind throughout the whole series. It was never hinted except for maybe at the swings, and inside the openings pretty much gave it away, but I would say at the swings it was more hinting that he liked her too much. His motivations were very contradictory. He wanted to fuck her.
What are you doing? I want to fuck her!
Take it easy, man. Take it easy.
Be with her, prove that he was good, and kill her all at the same time. Well, I mean, it's contradictory if he wanted to do all that while she was alive. It is a villain who was established and built up for a while, so it needs to be justified why he is like this. The story just goes, oh, he was born crazy, which is the laziest cop-out if I ever seen one. This is coming from a person whose favorite archetype is yandere. The other attempted rape scenes in SAO are bad for different reasons. It isn't because raping is bad, but more on how they went about it. Goblin Slayer is a dark fantasy, and it isn't some main villain-like thing, with the main character being like, ew, I like them! I like goblins! Ah! Dark fantasies have people being evil for the sake of being evil, where not everything is sunshine and rainbows, and not everyone is doing stuff for moral reasons. Even Berserk has some enemies like this, where they are evil just for the sake of being evil and want to kill humans because that's just how they are. Are you gonna say everyone who likes Berserk and hates SAO are hypocrites? At some level, once you subscribe to the notion that one show is the same as another because of one aspect is somewhat similar by the most bare bones of way, you can make the most ridiculous comparisons, such as Dragon Maid is just like Goblin Slayer. I got over 99 problems with SAO, and the rape scene is just one. The fact that they showed the rape, or the goblins raping them, isn't the problem, but rather how they went about it inside the show. There are justifications for it. Unlike Sword Art Online, there is no justifications. There are actual reasons given to why the goblins do it. In Sword Art Online, it's just because he's crazy, and it came out of nowhere. Sword Art Online has it as a final villain, someone who was built up to be this major bad guy that you will have to fight, and is going to have some in-depth final backstory, justification figure out there was none. The goblins and goblin slayers were never meant to be that at all, ever. But hey, it doesn't contradict the themes, so it isn't a flaw, am I right, guys? And I'm not even going to touch the Jewish and white supremacist comments in there. Okay, well, maybe a little.
Where's my minority report? Do I even have one?!
I'm going to keep watching it, if for no other reason that I can actually see it being good later on. And it triggers a lot of people. Although I rarely drop anything, so that isn't saying much. I would say out of the three, this one is the least interesting in all the three. It isn't usually a good sign for me to spot so many mistakes on the first episode. But if you want a dark gore fest or a comedy, then this may be to your liking. Oh, before I forget, the goblins aren't villains. The closest thing that fits is antagonists, but they're not villains.
Rich kid asshole, paint me as a villain.
Unless you want to use this extremely vague definition for villain, then go right ahead. The goblins are villains. But so is the Goblin Slayer, you fucks! And it's all because of this actions part, implying that there is such a thing as an inherently evil action, regardless of the context. For something to be inherently evil, you have to prove that in every situation ever, it is used for evil, and disprove every opposing position on why it isn't evil. If there is ever a situation where it isn't evil, then it isn't inherently evil. If you can't prove that it isn't evil in literally every situation ever, no matter the context, then you judge it based on the context. In this situation, it is just a race that is trying to survive, which means it isn't evil, unless you think things like tigers, humans, and literally any carnivore ever is just evil. With this, you can't just look at the actions, but the reasonings behind the actions. If the reasoning isn't for evil means, then they aren't a villain, but rather an antagonist. I mean, this isn't a good term for villain anyways, but it's the most vague term out there to get it close to having the goblins considered a quote-unquote villain, and it still doesn't follow it.
I shouldn't have to leave you with a milky booty hole. You know better. I know. Now what are we gonna do? Go to school and get a real job. That's right. Thank you, Rayman! Don't thank me. Thank Ray.
なんだろうとお前の口の中に入れることができるんだぜ。